This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Saved by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is champion! They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Porteous says cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. We are sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. Today is March 18th, 2025, and I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. Later in the show, we'll have an interview with new Ballard FC player, Kelyn Rowe, who will be playing in the U.S. Open Cup on Wednesday. Well, pretty bummer of a week ended with a relative thud on Saturday when the Sounders lost 1-0 to St. Louis City. It wasn't so much that they lost, but more how reminiscent that loss was of last year's struggles. The Sounders mostly dominated possession, were active defensively, but couldn't find a goal and really weren't that dangerous. So, Aaron, I guess the question is, how freaked out are you basically off of two bad games? A week ago, we were flying high.
Yeah, we were rolling. Yeah. It's, the Cruz Azul game was deflating, but kind of, whatever. I mean, we talked about it, I think, last week because we recorded right after the game.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm never going to get too broken up about losing to what I think is frankly a better team in the Champions League, especially that early. But the St. Louis game, I'm also not going to freak out too much about. St. Louis is an exceptionally good defensive team. They got really lucky to get a free kick where
They've
did.
not allowed any goals in 4 games.
Not allowed to go a goal in 4 games. You're right. They got really lucky to get that free kick where they did. I think Jackson Reagan made the smart play there. That's, if not a goal, that's as close as you're going to get to a goal without seeing how it ends. I think, I guess, unless you're the Timbers and, stoppage time. And then, a fantastic free kick that on first watch, I thought Stefan Fry maybe could have done a little better with. On repeat watches, don't really think there's anybody to blame for that one.
I mean, let's talk about that a little bit. That was a really nice free kick. And I was surprised at how many people were like, oh, the wall barely jumped and Fry got a bad, and it, I don't know, man. He bends that thing over the wall about as well as you can bend, as you can get it up and down. I mean, that thing has so much topspin, and it basically hits the side. And then when you beat the wall like that, the goalie is always at a disadvantage. The reason the wall is set up is to keep them from going near post. And once they beat the wall, it's always going to be tough for the goalie to make that save.
It is, yeah. And I mean, there's not a lot you can do. It's definitely a tip your cap situation when somebody hits a free kick that well. Even if you're nitpicking and you can say, oh, maybe he should have gotten a slightly better jump. Maybe the wall should have, jumped a little earlier or later, whatever it is. It was about as inch perfect as a free kick can get. And, that was relatively early in the game. I thought the Sounders looked pretty good in the attack early on. And from there on out, St. Louis had absolutely no interest in attacking. And hey, that's their prerogative. Olaf Melberg is a guy that I love dearly, and he is going to coach his teams really well defensively, and he did. And with the guys the Sounders were missing, the fact that they had just played midweek at altitude, it was always going to be an uphill battle. And then I think just with the circumstances being what they were early in the game, giving up kind of a flukish kind of goal, it was always going to be a long road back. And that doesn't mean it's not a frustrating result, because I do think that I think people are underrating St. Louis, but I do think that's a team that the Sounders are more than capable of getting a result against. But also, it's a game that in isolation, I'm just not really too worried about. You're not going to win every game. I don't think this team is going to compete for a supporter shield. I think Miami is going to run away with it again based on the way things have gone so far. So not a big deal, right? But I think in the context of the injuries the Sounders have had, losing that game, 4-1, even going back to the Charlotte game, I think that if the Sounders had won that Charlotte game and not drawn, even that makes things feel better, even though it was like a month
way
ago
better,
now.
I'd say. Yeah.
Now you're in a situation where you've won one game all year. You've got 4 points from four now.
4 points,
and that's that's not horrendous. They've got a reasonably light schedule coming up, but I think people were so ready to be excited about this team, and especially after the LAFC game, I think people thought that it was back to champagne football and back to easy street. And now it's not going to feel not quite as much feeling that way. And I think even if the Sounders are able to be competitive, to pick up some points, pick up some results, if the way the St. Louis game went is any indication, maybe it's not going to be as much fun as the LAFC game was, or even the Charlotte game was, right? So that's kind of a bummer. But hopefully guys can get healthy on schedule, and the Sounders can kind of grind it out in their absence, and we're not in too deep of a hole once things are back to full strength.
Yeah, I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm pressing the panic button at all. And I would even say the prospects of them getting some results in the short term are not that remote. I think what was so tough about this week was sort of the real, especially the St. Louis game, was sort of this slap across the face of, it might not be fun. Like, this is a team who I fully expect to make the playoffs, who I expect to be good once everyone's playing together. And I still like this team when healthy, but for the next, month at least, they're probably not going to be remotely full strength. Jordan and Pedro are two big pieces of this team, and they just aren't going to be there for that time. And they're a big part of what makes this a fun team to watch. Now, could that change if Jesus Ferreira comes out on Saturday and balls out? Hey, I'm ready to start over again, I guess. But I think what's so tough about this week was sort of this, it was just like dragging you back down into the muck of, well, they get results, but they aren't always fun to watch. And I really genuinely thought this was going to be a different team, and it obviously still could be. But I think the negative emotions around this team, like I'll say this, someone said, hey, if they don't give up that free kick, that's a good result on the road. And I think there's some truth to that. That is a good result on the road, but I don't think the freak out would be any different. I think people are mostly reacting to just not scoring. It's not that they think this is a bad team. It's just that it's not a very fun team, and they weren't that, and they just weren't a fun team to watch. If Obed gets that penalty and they score it and you come out with a late equalizer, I think you maybe feel a little bit better about it, but it's that zero that really just hangs over you. And yeah. I don't other than to say, hopefully we feel different after this week. I don't have a real response to anyone who is just frustrated with playing sloggy football right now.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I think it's unfortunate for many reasons, but it's unfortunate these injuries happened when they did, because I think if the Sounders had played the kind of football they played against LAFC and Charlotte to some extent for an extended period of time, and then you lose these guys for a month or 6 weeks or however long it's going to be, you have the proof of concept over time.
Right.
So when you say, look, like it's not exciting right now, but that's because we're missing the horses. But we know that this team, when it's at full strength, is really good. But we've had 1.5-ish games of seeing that, and I'm still a believer that they can be that. But I don't blame anyone else for being skeptical, and also for just like being like, all right, well, I guess I can start paying attention in August or whatever, right? And it's a bummer. It's really unfortunate. So I'm hopeful that they're obviously not going to be as much fun to watch as they are with Jordan and Pedro. But I'm hopeful that, with a full week of training, with, I'm assuming, either Jesus playing at the 9 or Jesus kind of understanding a little bit more what his role is going to be without Jordan and Pedro, that they can, get some cohesion. Because I did see a lot of decent stuff happening that just fell apart towards the end. Yeah. And I think there is something to be said for the fact that these guys hadn't had a chance to practice together with Jesus playing at the 9 barely at all, if at all. And, that at he's still kind of 1
day of training, 2 days of training.
Right. And he's still, getting integrated into the team in the first place. So, I'm hopeful that they can be a little more fun than they were against St. Louis, who, again, on the road, really good defensive team, short rest. At home against Houston, maybe it's a different story. Maybe they can come out a little more positively and, if not be as exciting as they have been, show some basic competence in the final third would be a start.
Yeah, that would be a good start. And it is important to note this is still an Albert Rusnak who has looked good, frankly, most of the time that he's played this year. He was good. He's been good in most of the games. He's been, I guess he wasn't great against RSL and he wasn't great against St. Louis, but he was really good against LAFC. He was really good in the Antigua games when he played, at least. So I don't know. I'm on the fence a little bit. He was good against Charlotte, I'll add. So, I am still hopeful. I really am. And it's going to be interesting seeing how much Georgie plays as well. This is a player who, it's funny because it's really easy to get excited about him in short spurts because you just see him going at tired legs. Even when when he started this year, it's been, well, I guess he's been up and down in his starts. But when he is a player who you see what's exciting about him. It's not hard to appreciate what he does well. But when he starts, you sort of see the bigger picture and how there are holes in his game and how he doesn't quite have the polish that you really want to see. And he's, I think, hugely improved this year. He's got, the fact that he has 3 assists already is, I think, a really positive sign. But this is a player who has never put up big numbers at any level. And so 3 assists is a step forward. But I think maybe the best example of the yin and yang of his game was, he had this great run through the middle of the field in the second half, I believe. And I guess that was in the first half. And he has Ferreira on his right all alone. And he's not a selfish player. So I don't think this is a thing where but for whatever reason, he decided to shoot and he did not put it very close to the goal. And if he had just sort of laid it off to Ferreira, that would have been a much better chance. And this is the kind of mistake you expect to see somewhat from a inexperienced player. But I would hope that in the future, they're just finding each other better, that he is, because Georgie's going to be a big part of this team for the next month, or at least I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I think I always want people to pump the brakes when they start talking about the ceiling of guys like Georgie, because I think the more tape teams have on him, the more they're going to be able to adjust to what he does well. And I think when he's not running at tired legs, like you said, when he's coming in and playing against guys who are full strength, it's just going to be tougher to make that stuff happen. And his decision making, like, as you alluded to, is still a work in progress. But he's so close that if he can figure out that stuff, if he can find another move beyond just beat guys to the end line, and if he can get a little better in his decision making, that is going to unlock a pretty special player. And so maybe that's the upside of him getting, this sort of forced playtime over the next month, 6 weeks or so, is that he's going to get those real world reps and opportunities against higher level competition. Because he hasn't started very much in MLS. I think like 3 or 4 games at most, I would imagine. So without looking it up. And, I think just getting those reps is precious. MLS Next Pro just isn't the same level of competition. And so stuff that works there is maybe not going to work in MLS. And I think, having a chance to get that run out is either going to give us a much better idea of what his limitations are, or give him an opportunity to sort of break through those limitations.
So my other bigger picture takeaway from that game was Ferreira playing as a number 9. I think, like most people, I came away from my first viewing of that game pretty down on him and thinking like, okay, maybe this is why the Sounders have used him mostly not as a 9. They've mostly used him sort of sitting underneath, usually as a dual 10. And nothing from that game, I don't think, disabused me of thinking that he is better when he's got the ball at his feet a lot. And he just did not have a lot of touches in this game. But what the difference I noticed in the rewatch is he was making those runs. He was trying to get in behind, and he was sort of looking for service. It just they weren't finding him for one reason or another. Sometimes they attempted the pass and it just didn't make it through. A lot more times they just didn't attempt the pass. And I guess my takeaway was, look, he's a different kind of number 9 than Jordan, and maybe having more training reps with each other will just make him better. And I don't think that's a outlandish thing to hope for. One of the things that Christian talked about after the game was they basically don't get to train 2 days in a row. Their most extensive training is getting 2 consecutive days of training, but that's almost never real training where they can go all out. It's a lot of, trying to impart little concepts and doing the bare, trying to maximize limited time, because they aren't able, they're usually recovering and then prepping and recovering and prepping. There's not a lot of like tactical nuance that they're able to impart on players. And so they're having to go through film and sort of do it on film. And in that way, I do think it creates challenges. And that's another part of this upcoming stretch where that's not going to be an excuse anymore. They did get 3 days off this week, but then they're going to have 3 days of training. And then it's going to be regular training sessions after that. They're going to be, 1 game a week basically for the next 3 months. They should be able to make some improvements. And, so I think that there is reason to be hopeful. I just am understanding of why people are a little down in the dumps right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to understand why people feel like they've seen this movie before, and the protagonists are different. Maybe supporting cast is mostly the same, but some of the leading characters are a little different, and the circumstances are a little different, but it's still the same formula, right? And I totally get it. And I am hopeful though that this team is built to weather the storm a little better than last year's was, and instead of grinding their way to draws, they figure out how to win some games, especially at home.
Hopefully.
Because that was the part I think that was so frustrating for people last year. It wasn't just that it wasn't the most exciting team to watch. It was that they weren't an exciting team to watch, and they were dropping points in really frustrating ways. And I think if they can avoid that for the next 6 weeks and play well at home and grind out results on the road, they can probably get through it with the vibes mostly still intact.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to sort of end on a hopeful note for this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to do a brief conversation with Kelyn Rowe about playing for Ballard FC, and sort of he explains where that all came from. And then we're going to try out a new segment on the show that we're just vaguely calling Power Rankings right now. This week's Power Rankings, we're going to talk about power ranking potential Sounders stadium locations, because this promises to be a big story over the next 7 or 8 years, I suppose, next decade, really. And we might as well get a good start on that now. With that said, I'm Jeremiah. This is No Sadietis. We'll be right back. All right. Well, we're joined by Kelyn Rowe, former Sounders legend, Federal Way legend, and now Ballard FC player for the Open Cup. Welcome to the show, Kelyn.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a while for us, huh?
Yeah, it has. So, tell me how this came up? You're playing in the U.S. Open Cup. I don't think did you even play in the U.S. Open Cup for the Sounders?
I did. Yeah, we played 2 games for the
Okay.
Sounders in Open Cup. Obviously, a bunch of them in New England.
Right.
But yeah, it was pretty interesting. I got a call from Lamar and Sam, and he posted a group text, and it was like, "Hey, if you guys are available, we'd love to have you out." And so, Lamar and I laughed about it. James Riley and I laughed about it, and then when it came down to the brass tacks, it was like, this would be a lot of fun. I think I could, provide something and be that old guy to mentor these young ones. And so we gave it a try, and it fit.
So I don't know if this factors into the decision at all, but this doesn't seem like it was something that was all that common until relatively recently. And now all of a sudden, like with Sasha playing last year, and then he's gotten this whole like kind of former MLS All-Star team together now. Does that make it a little easier for a decision like this, or were you even aware of all that stuff going on?
Yeah, I remember it last year because they gave us a call. Last year, Sasha gave me a call, and then this year he did as well. And he goes, "If you're willing to play," and I go, "You know what? I got to stay true to my roots and stick with Ballard. It'd probably be not a good look. You buy into San Jose and Ballard FC, and then you go to play somewhere else against them." So, no, Sasha gave me that call, and I think it's so cool. I think for a game, 2 games, 3 games, even when these teams are they're accepted into the Open Cup, but maybe can't field a team, and they want to bring excitement to their town. I think what Sasha's doing, bringing those guys together, is just a really cool thing for fans, for those guys to get one last run at a competitive game, enjoy themselves, but also, kind of bring awareness to that town and that team.
And so are you also a part owner of Ballard FC now?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess that does make it a little easier. You know who to call and you know who to...
Yeah, I've got some speed dials.
Right, exactly. So have you ever actually played with Lamar?
We never played with each other. We've only played against each other, and it was when he was in DC, Montreal, and then back when he was a Sounder as well. I've got a photo. I gotta find it somewhere. It was Zakawani, it was Lamar, it was, I think, Brad and myself, all in the same photo. It was pretty funny.
So were you trying to talk Lamar into playing too, or is he too far removed from playing at this point?
He's too far removed. We did make jokes at him. Yeah, I told him if he played, I would play. And he gave me a hell no.
So how many training sessions have you actually been able to do with Ballard?
Close to 6.
Okay.
Yeah, and a few scrimmages.
And so does it feel pretty natural for you? How would you describe? I mean, I'm assuming you've been playing some pickup. I think I heard that you maybe were playing with Washington Athletic Club for a little bit too.
Yeah, there are some pickup games that I'll jump into just to kind of get. Honestly, especially for us guys who are retired recently, it's a bit of a therapy session just to kind of get our we're used to stepping across the line and the world doesn't matter anymore, and so that little bit of playing, even if it's a late night Thursday pickup with the whack, it's a little bit of a therapy session. So this even bigger. It allows me to kind of give my knowledge and give everything I can and step across that field again, and the whole world outside goes away.
So as you probably know, there's actually 2 Open Cup games in the greater Seattle area going on this week. There's obviously you guys are hosting Spokane on Wednesday at Interbay Stadium, and then there's also the Tacoma Defiance are hosting Washington Athletic Club at Starfire on Thursday. Was there any consideration of you potentially playing for? You mentioned. Did you consider playing for Washington Athletic Club too, or was it kind of like if you're going to play, it's going to be Ballard? That's how it is.
I got asked to do so. Because we play the Thursday night games together as a kind of a pickup, or I guess a men's league they call it. But yes, there was an opportunity, but it was one and all. It was going to be Ballard or nothing.
And so, what is your expectation going into this game? Obviously, Spokane is a professional team. They're a USL League One team. Last year, Ballard played them about as tough as they could play them before ultimately falling. But you go into this feeling like, yeah, why not? Why can't we win this?
Oh, absolutely. There's just from playing with it, and obviously me being a little bit on the outside looking in. When I watch this team, it's pretty. We got some talented players. It's pretty incredible. So I'm hoping that I can just add on to that, add a little bit of experience to their fast twitch legs that are continuously running. So it's going to be exciting. I watched that game last year, and it could have gone either way. Honestly, I think Ballard really put it to them, and I hope that this year we can actually win it.
So, are there tickets still available for Wednesday?
I believe so.
And what kind of crowd are you expecting for this match?
Full house.
And
Full house. Rain or shine, Ballard shows up.
Yeah, and so this is like about a 1,500 seat stadium that they're playing in,
plus standing room. And a beer garden behind the goal.
Yeah. No, it sounds like I still need to get out to a game. Maybe I'll be able to get out there tomorrow if I can.
Oh, it's cool. It is honestly, it is very, very cool. The intimate experience, that's for sure.
Well, awesome. Is there anything else? You're still doing Sounder stuff too, right? You're doing.
I'm doing on the radio most games with the Sounders, and then I'm actually gonna start with some rain stuff too, but that's not solidified yet.
And how are you finding your post playing career? Has this been are you enjoying it?
It's going to be very busy here soon, but yeah.
And you still have the wine club?
Yep. And I actually just signed an offer to be an insurance broker at USI as well. So I've got about 4 jobs going on, but busy is fun. So we'll see.
Well, congratulations, Kelyn. It was great catching up with you. And I guess you're getting ready to go out to training, so I don't want to keep you any longer.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, and thanks.
Yeah, no problem, Jeremiah. Thanks.
All right, you're listening to Nos Audietes, and we'll be right back.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Audietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
It's getting to be that time of year when you need to figure out how to watch Sounders games. If you're an Alliance member, you are getting a free subscription to MLS Season Pass, and you're covered. Similarly, if you're a T-Mobile subscriber, you're also covered. But if you're going to have to pay for one, you may as well give us some of that money. By using the link sounderatheart.com/MLS Season Pass, you'll help support independent media while also getting access to every Sounders game, every other MLS game, MLS 360, and all sorts of other content. Just to make things extra easy, we'll put a link in the show notes too. Thanks. Nos Audietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Welcome back to Nos Audietes. So hopefully you enjoyed that little interview with Kelyn Rowe. He is just a reminder. They are playing on Wednesday against Spokane Velocity. I guess you can still get tickets. That's at least Kelyn seemed to think you could still get tickets. They're playing at Interbay Stadium. The game's also on YouTube. And then on Thursday, Tacoma Defiance are hosting Washington Athletic Club at Starfire. That game is also on YouTube. There are definitely tickets for that one. And in fact, if you are an Alliance member, I believe you get in free if you show proof of your Alliance membership, I guess is how it works. And otherwise, it's like a $5 donation to the Rave Foundation. So good reason to go out and watch some Open Cup, especially with the Sounders not in it. But Aaron, we speaking of South, the Renton Tukwila area, I wrote about this last week. It's not news. The Sounders have been saying that they want their own stadium for a couple years now. They've said they want to. They're at least exploring the possibility of moving to Longacres. But I thought that one of Adrian's comments about the forcefulness with which he's like, no, we really need our own stadium, was probably the most straightforward he's been in that broad desire. And he didn't say that, oh, well, it's going to be at Longacres, but all indications are that the Sounders are looking very, very closely at Longacres. And I guess maybe I'll give my power rankings and then we can talk about it from there. I guess that's maybe the good format of this. But I'm gonna rank sort of like my top 5 spots where I think the Sounders could be playing. And I'll start with the bottom. And honestly, number 5 might be Longacres. I'm not saying Longacres would be a disaster, but let's start here. Or no, I'll give my whole list and then we can kind of go through it. Number 5 is Longacres. Number 4 would be Lumen, exactly as it is now, while you're a secondary tenant and you are stuck in a sort of no-win situation. I still think I prefer that to Longacres. Number 3 is some other like honestly any other location in Seattle. That might even be 3 would be any location in Seattle. 2 would be Lumen Field, but it's the Sounders. They're the primary tenant. And 1, I suppose, would be something like, and I don't have a location for this, but a purpose-built stadium in a area that is connected specifically to light rail and has similar, if not quite the same, levels of access to as Lumen does. So anyway, to recap, number 1, a purpose-built stadium in Seattle on mass transit lines. Number 2, Lumen, but it's the Sounders. 3, some random place in Seattle. 4, Lumen as is now. 5, Longacres. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I can't find too much to argue with there. I think I agree with your order unless I'm putting on my Adrian Hanauer hat. I understand why Longacres. Yeah, it's a nice hat.
Yeah.
I understand why the Sounders would rather play at Longacres than Lumen with the current situation. I do get it.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, I don't really care, and I don't blame other people for not caring, right? Because ultimately they're not the ones that are in charge of making the business decisions for the team.
Yeah.
But I do think that if the Sounders are going to stay competitive for the long haul, and especially if people want them, to loosen up the purse strings a little bit, I think longer term, they're probably going to need to have their control of their own revenue on game days.
Yeah.
And on non-game days too.
Yeah. And I think there's a valid argument. I think there's a totally valid argument to be made to flop 4 and 5 because, right. And I'm not going to do it because I don't feel like I need to do Adrian's job and it's his job to come out and make this case. But I can imagine a case where it makes sense. And because I do think MLS is moving rapidly in a direction where they want every team to control their own venue. And I think that makes sense from a business perspective. I think Chicago is probably going to end up in a purpose-built stadium, probably in Chicago. New England is already moving towards getting their own stadium. And then that basically leaves Atlanta, who at least controls their stadium, even if it's not purpose-built for them, us, and the Whitecaps, who are up for sale and probably can't exist long-term in, I guess, Charlotte too. Charlotte is a similar situation as Atlanta, where they are playing in a football stadium, but they at least control it. And then Vancouver, which I don't think BC play. Like I love BC Place as a visitor, but I don't think that's a viable long-term home for them. And when you look at it like that, I can understand why MLS is like, no, the Sounders are, if they're a marquee team, they got to be in their own facility. I get it. There's a lot of reasons to want to be in your own facility. I don't think the Sounders have made a particularly good case for why Longacres would be a suitable stadium though right now. Like it's technically on the train line, but it's not really, like, it's not real mass transit. That train as it is now does not run during game time for the Sounders.
Making the case for Longacres being on the rail line is the clearest sign to me that somebody has never even thought about taking mass transit regionally, because it's just not, it's not a viable option. It's 6 trips a day during the week and none on the weekends.
Yeah, best case scenario, they get that they are able to somehow convince the like very powerful BNSF controls that the freight. They control the right of way there. And so somehow they would have to convince them to allow Sounder to run more frequently on game days. And then the Sounder would have to actually want to do that, which is not a given either. And so best case scenario, though, let's just say best case, you get it. So you've got 2 daily trips in from Seattle and 2 daily trips up from Tacoma on that rail line. That's maybe like 2,000 people max. Yeah. There's one rapid bus line that goes by there, and it's really not a rapid bus line. It basically is a rapid bus line that comes from the Tukwila light rail station, and it takes 20 minutes to get there from the Tukwila light rail station. And the light rail station takes you 40 minutes to get to from downtown Seattle. Now, I will say the train ride is only 10 minutes from Seattle. It's a really easy train ride. But it's just one train line. It's not, and you would have to get to the train anyway. It's not the easiest thing.
However long it takes you to get to the station now, to the stadium now.
Yeah,
it's 10 minutes on top of that, because you got to go catch the train and you got to park and you got to whatever, Yeah. It's
not. I just don't. I'm not seeing the case for Longacres being a good location. And I think right now it's also really hard to imagine Longacres being a good location, because where it is sort of out in the middle of an office, of a wasteland of office parks, of industrial spaces, and of wetlands. There's nothing like the closest restaurant, not like there's a cafe at Longacres, but outside of that, you have to, you're 15 minutes from 10 minutes from downtown Renton, which, not to badmouth Renton, but 10 minutes from downtown Renton is, you're a ways away from where people are, I guess is what I'm saying. No one lives there right now. Like literally no one lives near there. No one could walk there.
Everything, all of the pluses that I've heard the Sounders put forward about potentially a stadium being there is, well, imagine if, or
exactly
when the apartments are there, or when the transit service is better. Like, it's all predicated on stuff happening that I'm just super skeptical is ever going to happen. It would be great if King County said, oh, you want to put a stadium there? Well, we're going to expand our rapid ride service, and give you dedicated game day service. Happen. No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. we don't even have dedicated day service for Sounders games now.
Right. No, that's
right.
Right. No, that's a very fair point. And I think it's in the thing is that I'm not saying that Longacres is DOA. What I am saying is that the Sounders have not even started to make the case for it. And
yeah,
I think right now where we sit, it's impossible for me to see this as a real viable solution. In part, like I don't know, I just look at like today, NWSL Colorado came out and said, hey, we want to build a 14,500 seat stadium in Denver proper. And basically every team in the country, every soccer team in the country is trying to build close to urban centers. And the Sounders are talking about possibly bailing on the most accessible stadium location in the whole continent and going to move someplace that is like essentially Frisco.
Right.
It just feels like a very backwards move.
A team that talks all the time about their sustainability goals and pledges and has nice little slogans about, how much, right. Yeah, it would be, I think, a betrayal of a lot of things about the culture of the club and a pretty frustrating decision. Even if I understand it from a dollars and cents perspective, I'm never going to be supportive of it.
Yeah. And all that said, I get why Lumen is becoming unviable. And I do think there's something to be said about how in its current situation, like maybe I should have flipped those two, because I do think there is an element of Lumen that feels unviable right now. But I think also part of that is that I don't see the Sounders pushing First and Goal to improve the situation either. Like I just don't see them fighting the good fight to let's make sure there's more concessions open. Let's make sure there's more activity in the concourse. Let's make sure that we aren't always getting the short straw when it comes to renovations on this stadium. Let's push First and Goal to build us a locker room. Let's push, let's do all these. Let's put up money to, let's try to be partners in getting grass in the stadium. Like, I don't see them doing any of that stuff. So I'm skeptical that they are putting in the sort of effort that they could, if they wanted to, make Lumen a better venue absent controlling it. Now, controlling Lumen could be a total paradigm shifter. I think they would probably have to figure out how to downsize it somewhat. I do think the Sounders are moving beyond the even aspirational goal of selling 70,000 tickets on a regular basis.
Yeah. They should be. I mean, if they still have that aspiration, I'm not sure what they're smoking over there. But yeah, I think it's pretty easy to see how you could make some changes to Lumen and have it be a perfect stadium, for soccer. It's really easy to see. And I mean, I guess it's not perfect. It's never going to be as perfect as one that's purpose built specifically for soccer. And that's the only thing that happens in it, but one that I think everybody would be thrilled with. And the location is impossible to beat. As we've talked about, just in terms of both getting there, all the stuff around it, and also just the setting in the stadium itself. I mean, it's just a beautiful place to watch a game. Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect location. And I think it's why it's been a tenable situation for so long, right? And why it really hasn't been until the last few years that I think the Sounders were making noise about wanting their own stadium. And I think, in terms of the Sounders not doing what they could to make Lumen a better game day experience, I'm sympathetic to the idea that First and Goal views them as second class citizens. They do. They obviously do. But I do also remember a time not that long ago when going to games was more fun. And so it's obviously, unless First and Goal has completely said, no, we're not doing anything for you anymore. And that's just really hard for me to believe that they would have changed that drastically. It really seems like you're right that the Sounders aren't doing all they could to press to make it a more enjoyable experience. I will say that I think the experience of going to live events has gotten worse across the board. Right? I think automation, cashless payments, all that kind of stuff, emphasizing speed over service and quality. I think pretty much, I mean, even at Climate Pledge, right? Climate Pledge is like a really nice state of the art arena. For the most part, the experience of going and getting food or going and getting a beer or whatever is more or less the same as it is at Lumen. You walk in, you grab it, you walk out. And that's, it's not a lot of fun for me, but they have better options, better food options. And then obviously T-Mobile just laps everybody with their food options. And but there was a time where you could get cool food at the stadium at Lumen. You could get interesting stuff or you could get cheap stuff. And it just hasn't been that way since the pandemic, if not before. But I feel like the MLS Cup final was the last game I went to before the pandemic in 2019. And that felt very much like, when I was going to every game, right? It felt like pretty much more or less the same experience. And so it really does feel like since the pandemic has ended or, things have gotten back to normal, that there's just never been this effort to ramp things back up to the way they used to be. And
yeah,
I'm willing to believe that's not entirely the Sounders' fault, but yeah,
they're not exactly just mere passengers either.
Right.
And I think the other thing is I think back to 2022, the Champions League final, and they did, they had 70,000 people there, and that felt as special as any game. And I think it's sort of a reminder to me that, I don't know, maybe Atlanta has a bigger fan base. That might be true. I don't know if that's true or not. Atlanta's certainly a bigger metropolitan area, so that's possible. But the Sounders have this sort of superpower right now. They have this massive fan base that just wants to be they want something to get excited about. And the Sounders have played good soccer over the last 2 years, but they haven't necessarily played exciting soccer, but they also just haven't done enough to pull fans in. And it just feels like going to Longacres, and I saw a few people sort of making this comment that as if downtown Seattle is a lost cause. And it's like we're talking about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they packed this stadium, admittedly for a big event, but what are we talking about? Like, it's really only the last 2 years, at least to me, where the attendance numbers have gotten real red flaggy, where you're like, gosh, this is thinner than I remember it being. And the LAFC was a good example of that, where there was probably 20,000 people in the building, and it still got loud and it still felt fun, but it just feels different. And I just hope that the Sounders have not given up on reclaiming that, because there's no, like, I don't know. I look at the Sounder at Heart subscribers as a good example of this. There's no other market in the US that would support a full-time operation like where we're currently running. And we are still growing. And so, like, that just tells me there is a big fan base out there that is thirsting to be, like, excited and turned on. And I guess to get back to the point of this little discussion, there's got to be someplace in Seattle. I don't know where it is.
Yeah,
there's got to be someplace in Seattle where you can make this work. Maybe it's the Hanson lots that are south of the stadium. I don't know. I was talking to someone today about how, I don't know, maybe there's space over at Northgate.
Yeah, I was going to say Northgate. Yeah,
like there is definitely some areas, if you parse up that land, that feels like you could put a stadium on, and man, that would be pretty slick. I mean, you're right next to the freeway. You are connected to light rail. You are in an urban area, but it's not totally built out yet. So there's still potential to sort of like shape it differently. I'm sure there would be some, fight over, how, like, there's housing there, but it's not single family housing. I don't know.
Right.
Or at least right there. I don't know. I just think I really hope they're open-minded about where they're going to go, if they're going to go. Cause it would just be so sad for me to, like, I'll go to games. This is my job. I'm not saying that. And they might build a great stadium out there, but I don't know. Right now, where we sit, I am not convinced at all. I'm not convinced.
I'll even go so far as to say, even if it's out of the city limits, right? If they build a stadium in Shoreline or Bellevue or something, just
or
somewhere
federal
that
way. I guess going the other way, federal way.
Let's not go nuts. I would rather go to Tukwila than Federal Way. I'll tell you that much. But somewhere on light rail with dedicated transit going to and from, that's just got to be better than Longacres. The selling point of Longacres is we own the land. That is
the extent of it, I believe.
And that is a decent selling point, right?
I mean, it's important. It's an important point. I don't know if it's a selling point to me, but it's an important point for sure for turning it into a reality.
But I think if you are trying to shake off the sense that the fan base has that you are not willing to spend money to be excellent, maybe saying, well, this is the cheapest place to build a stadium, so we're going to build it here, even though literally everyone in the world hates the idea.
Convince them otherwise.
It's not the way to go about it. It's not the way to go about it. And you know what? You can sell that land, right? And use that to fund it. Like, you can sell property that you own.
Well, I mean, they're investors in this project, the Longacres project, and presumably there's designs to build all sorts of housing out there and to build sort of a live, work, play environment. And there's no reason that they can't still make money on that deal. And then that money can't help fund a place where they're actually going to build a stadium. I am just like I said, I am just super skeptical that a stadium there really makes sense. And I suppose on some level you can brute force it. And I wouldn't even be surprised if for the first 5 or even 10 years it's working out. But if you're trying to cast like a long-term vision of what the Sounders are, and you're telling me that their long-term vision is a 20 or 25,000 seat stadium out in the suburbs, I just am not convinced that's the best thing to do for the long-term future of this team. And even if they're positioning themselves to sell, which I don't know, that is just a random thing I'm pulling out there. I have not heard anything along the lines that they're looking to sell. But if they were trying to position themselves for a sale, I don't know what kind of investor would be like, oh, you're going to build out in the suburbs. That's a great idea. Every other MLS team is building in their like directly in their down, trying to get down as close to downtown as possible. And you're leaving downtown. Please explain this to me. Like, why do I want to invest in that?
Why would you do that? Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine a world in which you were getting ready to sell or preparing to sell and decide to build a stadium. Like, what's the benefit of doing that? It doesn't make any sense to me. Here, speaking of the concept of sales though, my understanding, maybe it's incorrect, but my understanding is that Jody Allen is obligated to sell the Allen shares of all of the teams that
is a big
it would be very interesting to me if whoever wants to buy the Seahawks also wants that share of the Sounders and is interested in being a much more active partner.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think that could really change the dynamic a lot.
Well, that's interesting.
If whoever, because First and Goal is basically operating on behalf of the Seahawks.
Yes.
And when Paul Allen was an owner, and he was never engaged in the team, but in the early days of the Sounders, he seemed
their
a lot
business
more
operations ran the Sounders for the first 5 seasons. Yeah.
Right. And even after the first few years that they separated, it seemed like First and Goal was a lot more interested in treating the Sounders as a 1B, if not a first class partner, taking them seriously, not treating them like more or less a nuisance. And if they could get back to a situation like that at Lumen, I think that even that could really shift the scales back in Lumen's favor.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I hadn't really thought of that aspect of it. I think the other, but that is sort of speaks to the big unknown in this equation, which is the status of Jody Allen's ownership of the Seahawks. Because if she sells the Seahawks, independent of whatever happens to the shares that they own in the Sounders, who knows what the next owner is going to want to do with the Seahawks. And I don't think it's a completely fantastical idea to think that a new owner will come in and say, oh, I want to build a 75,000 seat stadium out in Kent or in Bellevue, right, or where at Emerald Downs or wherever, right? And they want to just build, right, or Longacres, I suppose. I don't think there's room there, but there's a world where the Seahawks leave Lumen, and all of a sudden, and that's sort of like the scenario where the Sounders could run that. But it would be interesting if the new owner of the Seahawks were to also buy into the Sounders, and I mean, at this point, it is interesting because the Sounders, I believe the Allens have a 25% stake in the Sounders. By the time this sale goes through, the Sounders will probably be valued at something like $1 billion. I mean, that's a $250 million chunk. You would think a new owner would have, like, for the Allens, they didn't pay almost anything, I don't think, to get that sort of share. So they don't treat it as a really valuable thing, whereas a new owner would have potentially have some juice in that relationship, and they might want to throw their weight around a little bit more. So that could change things for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I don't know if this power rankings conceit totally worked out how I imagined it. I don't know what I imagined, but I do think we had a good conversation about this stadium situation.
Yeah, I like it. I liked it.
So I don't know. We'll see how this evolves over time. But I think we're going to do a mailbag episode next week, just to give you a little heads up. And other than that, I urge you to go watch Ballard FC probably tonight. If you're listening to this, probably tonight. Heck, go out to Starfire, watch Tacoma in the Open Cup. Could be a lot of fun. I do like the Open Cup. All that said, I am Jeremiah Shan signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is Nos Arietes. Remember, you'll never get alone.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party. You guys like that? No? Awkward joke, dad joke right there, huh?